At the northern tip of South America lies a completely isolated island, surrounded by the waters of the ocean. A heavily guarded maritime prison stands on it. From the late 19th to the mid-20th century, the French government used the place as a penal colony for dangerous criminals and political prisoners. The narrative begins in 1931 in Paris. The protagonist, Henry, nicknamed Papillon, was a professional thief who operated in the world of crime, stealing valuable objects for mafia bosses. During one of his heists, Papillon kept some diamonds for himself, but was arrested by one of the mafia boss's informants. In a fit of rage, the boss himself framed Papillon for a murder he had committed. Consequently, he was sentenced to life in prison, destined to spend his entire life in jail. His fate was that infamous island prison in French Guiana. From the moment his sentence was pronounced, Papillon was determined to escape while awaiting his transfer to the penitentiary, and his friendship with a fellow inmate named Julot, who had also planned an escape and had done some research. Julot explained that to succeed, they would need a considerable amount of money to bribe the guards and a boat to flee the island. He said many wealthy prisoners hid funds in special places inside their bodies to avoid inspection and be able to pay bribes or buy a boat. Among the other inmates who were to be transferred to the island was a nervous, thin man with glasses. Louis Degas was a financial swindler and also a millionaire. Many inmates believed that Degas had hidden money inside him and wanted to kill him to seize his fortune and use it for future escapes. Naturally, Papillon did not want to commit murder, but motivated by Julot, he devised a method to get money. On board, Papillon discreetly approached Degas and warned him that some prisoners were threatening him and offered him protection in exchange for a fee. But Degas did not believe him and rejected the proposal, assuming that the police accompanying them would not allow any disturbances. However, he would soon realize how naive he had been. That same night, a prisoner took advantage of the general drowsiness and with a knife hidden on the table, stabbed his weak companion to death. He then opened his abdomen to take the money hidden inside him. The officers in charge of the custody, in search of the loot, looked the other way. Degas, who witnessed the entire scene, was paralyzed. The next morning, he sought out Papillon, who was strong and capable, and hired him as his personal escort. Papillon gladly accepted, as he combined strength and cunning. Degas needed protection, and Papillon was looking for help to finance his escape plan. That same night, the attacker returned to look for Degas. The aggressor was no match for him, and was soon immobilized and beaten until the guards arrived and separated them. Although Papillon was sanctioned with the deprivation of food for one day, that incident made the other prisoners realize that Degas had hired a formidable bodyguard. From then on, no one dared to threaten Degas again. After many days at sea, the ship with the prisoners finally arrived at the prison island. Upon entering the facility, the director held a general meeting. He stated that every time a group of inmates arrived, there were lunatics who dreamed of escaping, but none had achieved their goal. He warned that anyone caught trying to escape for the first time would be confined to a solitary cell for 2 years. A second failed attempt carried 5 years in solitude, followed by their transfer to another totally isolated island, where they would die. Also, if an inmate killed a guard during the escape, they would be instantly executed by decapitation. After that harsh warning, many prisoners abandoned their ideas of escape, but there were still some like Papillon who were determined to escape. Papillon tried to persuade Degas to accompany him, but he was confident that his wife and lawyer would fight to rescue him legally, so he rejected the proposal. One day, while Papillon was doing forced labor outside, he met a pimp and a group of indigenous women. Papillon saw an opportunity and managed to establish contact with the pimp. Finally, the pimp agreed that if he paid him 400 francs, he would help him escape by boat. But first, Papillon had to devise a plan to get out of prison and get to the pier. Before he could put it into action, an unforeseen event occurred. One morning, the director suddenly gathered everyone in the yard. It turned out that his acquaintance Julot had been caught trying to escape, and in the confrontation, he had killed 2 guards. The director, to set an example, ordered Julot to be publicly beheaded. Many inmates accustomed to hardship were not surprised by the scene. But Degas, the white-collar swindler, was terrified. His reaction caught the attention of the director, who, with an ironic face, entrusted Degas and Papon with the task of handling and burying Julot's body, taking it to the nearby mountains. On the way, Degas was paralyzed with fear. The guard who was watching them noticed his state and, enraged, gave him a lash with a whip. Seeing his financier almost in shock, Papon acted on impulse. He hit the guard with a stone, knocking him unconscious and killing him, and then fled alone towards the coast. However, he was seen by patrolling guards, and they started shooting. To escape, Papon jumped into a nearby river and let the current carry him downstream. By a miracle, he managed to evade his pursuers, although escaping the island depended on finding a boat. During the night, he went to the pier where he found the pimp with whom he had arranged for help. But in the middle of the chaos, he didn't ask Degas for the promised payment. He only begged to be helped out first, promising to pay later when he got to Paris. To his surprise, the pimp accepted without protest. Just as he was getting on the boat, several guards came out of the shadows and caught him. It turned out that the pimp had already been bribed by the director and never intended to help any prisoner escape. Even if Papon had arrived with money, they probably would have also captured him. He was quickly taken before the director. Fortunately, the guard that Papon hit with a stone had not died. He had only been knocked unconscious. Therefore, the director decided not to execute him at that moment, but to sentence him to 2 years in solitary confinement. The cell was a tiny room of barely 4 square meters in complete darkness. During those 2 years, Papon endured the confinement, sleeping on a wooden plank and feeding on a thin ration of vegetable puree that barely gave him the strength to stay alive. The guard he had hit periodically entered, using him as a punching bag to vent his anger. Papon was able to withstand the hunger and abuse, but what tormented him the most was the absolute silence. 2 months later, something unexpected happened. When the guard gave him his food, he found something unusual in the bucket. Along with the usual portion, there was half a coconut and a small note that indicated that from that day on, he would receive 1 coconut daily. It was not signed, but Papon knew it was Degas' work. He must have bribed the guards to send him that gift. That half coconut and that act of generosity revitalized his will to fight and escape. He began to reflect on what the director had told him. And if wasting life was actually a crime, then these 2 years in solitude would be his punishment for his mistakes. From then on, he was determined to escape and start a meaningful life. To do so, he began to train regularly, strengthening his body and planning another escape. But the calm did not last long. During a routine inspection, the director discovered the coconut hidden in his food, and furious, accidentally killed the guard who had accepted the bribe. He then demanded to know who had given him that gift and ordered Papon to betray them, but he refused to betray Degas, remaining silent. The director's reaction was even more severe. His daily rations were halved. 3 months later, in the midst of an extreme famine, Papon was on the verge of death. Just as he was starting to lose hope, the director arrived with a bowl of hot soup and promised him that if he revealed who had given him the coconut, he could eat soup every day. But hungry and exhausted, he resisted and did not betray Degas. To completely break his spirit, the director ordered the door of his cell to be sealed and left him in complete darkness and silence. His mind began to deteriorate quickly, and he began to hallucinate. However, his loyalty to Degas remained intact. Finally, after enduring those 2 years in isolation, Papon was released. He was emaciated, could barely walk, and was taken to the infirmary to recover. Degas, who had already become an advisor to the director, visited him in the clinic. He thanked him for not having betrayed him, and Papillon confessed that he had maintained his sanity by pretending to be crazy all that time with the intention of waiting for the right moment to escape. Degas also revealed that 2 nights before, the director organized a film screening for inmates and guards, and that this would be the perfect time to escape. Both devised a plan to escape together. They recruited 2 inmates in the infirmary, Mathurin and Cellier. One of them, a guard, had inappropriate desires towards Mathurin. The idea was to seduce him and steal his keys. Meanwhile, Cellier had connections with local fishermen who could help them get a boat to flee. Finally, the night of the escape arrived. First, Mathurin convinced the guard to take him to the bathroom, while Papillon and Cellier took the opportunity to immobilize the guard and take his keys. Then they escaped from the infirmary. Simultaneously, Degas, feigning a message from the director, requested a bottle of wine from the kitchen. He put a sleeping pill in the drink that he had previously bought in the infirmary and gave it to the guards, saying it was a gift from the director. After drinking it, the guards fell into a deep sleep. Papillon, with the keys in hand, joined the group and they managed to escape from the prison. They managed to buy a small fishing boat from a local sailor, although the boat was in poor condition and began to leak and fall apart in a short time. The situation became desperate. Cellier proposed throwing Degas into the water to lighten the load, as he considered him the weakest. But Papillon, who was confident that Degas was his most loyal friend, was vehemently opposed. He fought against Cellier, but he was stronger and managed to subdue him, beginning to strangle him. Just as Papillon seemed to be running out of air, Degas pulled out a small knife and stabbed Cellier in the back, killing him instantly. Papillon, with difficulty breathing, managed to escape the body and threw it into the sea. The deadly load was eliminated, and it seemed that the escape would be a success. But suddenly, an unexpected storm began to lash the boat. The boat swung violently, and everyone was knocked unconscious. Upon waking up, they discovered that some local women had rescued them and taken them to another island. But just when they thought they were safe, guards arrived from the prison. It turned out that those women betrayed them. Mayure tried to flee and was shot and killed in a matter of seconds. Papillon and Degas, with no other options, surrendered. Since it was his second attempt, Papillon received an additional sentence of 5 years in total isolation. In contrast, Degas was sent to Devil's Island, a place of total desolation, where prisoners ended up dying alone. Years passed, and upon completing those 5 years, Papillon seemed to have aged half a century. His hair was completely white, and his face, marked by the passage of time, showed accelerated aging, but the director did not finish him off. After that solitary confinement, Papillon was transferred to Devil's Island, which lacked fences or guards, as it was actually a natural prison surrounded by steep cliffs and shark-infested seas. Escaping from there was almost impossible. Most of the inmates ended up going crazy from despair and absolute isolation. However, to everyone's surprise, Degas had managed to maintain his sanity for so many years. Although everything seemed to indicate the opposite, he remained calm, rational, and serene. But Papillon had not given up on his goal. Every day he walked along the shore, observing the ocean, analyzing the movement of the tides. One day, he detected a pattern in the water's movement and had an idea: to build a rudimentary raft using palm bags and empty coconuts, which he filled to transform into a makeshift boat. When they were ready, they dragged them to the shore. Just as they were about to set sail, Degas suddenly confessed to him that he had become accustomed to the island and did not want to leave. He felt that this was his place, that he belonged to that site. Papillon was bewildered and confused, but at that moment he understood that his friendship was worth more than any doubt. Without saying a word, he gave him a strong hug and let go of one of the rafts, letting the current carry him far away. Fortunately, he was not hit by the waves or devoured by sharks. Floating on that makeshift coconut boat, Papillon let the current carry him far away, leaving behind his friend, whom he fully trusted. Years later, an already elderly Papillon with silver hair and a fragile appearance entered the office of a publishing house, carrying a manuscript he wanted to publish as his memoirs. When the director read those pages, he was impressed. He could not believe that such an extraordinary story was someone's real story. What is narrated comes from the 2017 movie Papillon, a remake of the 1973 classic film, both based on proven facts.